is Unapologetically Ashley, my podcast discussing topics such as dating, cooking, shopping, budgeting, and more, all with a disability. My goal is to show that, disabled or not, we are all the same, and while I may have a disability, it's not all of who I am. My name is Ashley, I'm 25 years old, and when I was born, the umbilical cord got wrapped around my neck 4 times with a knot, which cut off the oxygen to my brain, leaving me with a bunch of different disabilities, including CVI or cortical visual impairment, as well as a right hemiplegia, which is a type of cerebral palsy. Because I have both of these disabilities, oftentimes I can feel like an outsider, even within the disability community, like I'm trapped inside of a box. This can be quite isolating and lonely at times, and I can struggle with my disability, but at the end of the day, I'm just unapologetically Ashley. Welcome into episode 2, Shopping with a Disability, discussing what it's like shopping both online and in store when you have a disability. Now, depending on the type of disability you will have different experiences when it comes to shopping online versus in store. As someone with a vision impairment, you might think that shopping online is easier for me, just like with dating online. However, this actually isn't the case. It's the reverse. I find shopping in store to be much easier as someone with a vision impairment. Now, there are still some struggles when it comes to shopping in store, like, for example, the tags on clothing. When you go to buy clothing from a clothing shop, a lot of the time the tags are too small and I can't read the price of something or the size. I am usually between a size small and a size medium, or a size 10 and a size 12. It can be really hard to know what your size is going to be on their website because different pieces of clothing are going to fit you differently, as well as different stores having different sizes for their clothing. So it can get a bit tricky when it comes to shopping online. So that's one of the reasons why I like in-store, despite the fact that I can't always read the tags. However, there are some stores that I love because they actually have pretty big tags. A store that I found quite recently was Posty Plus. I found that it had massive tags, but also massive font. And I found that very helpful as someone with a vision impairment, because some stores will have still relatively small tags but have bigger font, which I do also find very helpful. But this one had both, and so they had pretty big font, like even bigger than I'd seen in other stores, and I found that very, very helpful when it came to knowing the price of something, like if it was $15 or $20, or, the size, if this was a small or a medium. And it was very helpful when it came to trying on the clothes as well, because I could kind of get a gist of what I was going to be, and then if it wasn't quite right in that piece of clothing, I could try something else. Now, I am also someone that doesn't like certain fabrics or materials, very similar to someone who has autism. As you know, when I was born, the umbilical cord got wrapped around my neck 4 times, which cut off the oxygen to my brain, and so I got some brain damage alongside my disabilities, so I did get a bit of brain processing issues and things like that as well. I don't know why, but I tend to have some similarities with people with autism as well. I don't know if that comes down to just the fact that I'm visually impaired, so it's harder for me to recognize facial expressions or what, but I also have a sensitivity to certain fabrics, and I prefer to get cotton fabrics. I do think, especially as time goes on and there are more disabled people out there, it would just be more beneficial for people like me with a vision impairment to have slightly bigger tags. But when it comes to buying furniture, I've found that shopping online can be relatively helpful. I've never been great at maths, so sometimes I need a little bit of help when it comes to the measurements of things. But when it comes to some furniture, you can buy that online. Now, again, it does depend on the type of furniture you're buying. For example, I would highly recommend buying things like chairs or couches in store, because you can sit on them, you can feel the fabric, you can move your bum around and make sure that it's comfy and squishy. Especially couches, you want to really squish down into the couch and it be super comfortable to lie on. This also applies to beds as well. All of those things that you're going to be sleeping or sitting on, you want to make sure that you do try them out in the store before you buy them. When it comes to other things like shopping at the supermarket, for example, as someone with a vision impairment, there are a few different things that I do to make it easier for me. Again, I don't shop online for the supermarket. I have ordered things online with the help of my mum, but usually I will just go into my supermarket. I have a countdown very close to my house, so I will go there a lot. I will walk in and scan through the rows, just seeing where everything is, kind of getting a mental feel for the place and the layout of it. I feel like with clothing stores and sometimes furniture shops, they do rotate the way the shop looks, but when it comes to grocery stores, it's a lot harder for them to do that. So things like groceries or chemists, usually everything is in the same place. So it's a lot more helpful when it comes to scanning the place and knowing where everything is straight off. So that is something that I do, whether I'm going in with my groceries or just by myself first. I will try and get a feel for where everything is. I will also memorize things by their color. So if something I really like to buy a lot has a specific color, I will memorize that color because I can't read what it says and I can struggle with what aisle things are in. So something I do to help is look for colors. So first try to memorize the different aisles as best you can, and then try to look for colors. For example, I love having ginger nuts with my tea, and the packet is red and green. So what I will do is memorize the red and green packet as best I can, and then when I go in there, sometimes I end up finding something else that's red and green, but because I've kind of memorized where the ginger nuts will be in my specific supermarket, it's a lot easier for me to find it every single time. I know, okay, this is where it should be, and then I scan to look for the specific colors, the red and green, and when I find it, I know those are the ginger nuts. Same with things like popcorn, I memorize the brand I like, or things like milk. If I can't find something, or something is more hidden because of my CVI or cortical visual impairment, a lot of the time when it comes to looking for things, it clutters my vision when I'm in a very crowded environment. I find things like toothpaste, toothbrushes, or things like deodorant to be very, very hard, and oftentimes I will get my mum to help me find those packets because they're so small, whereas things like shampoo, conditioner, or body wash I find a lot easier because I kind of memorize what they look like and they're a lot bigger, so it's easier to kind of scan through the shelves and find what I'm looking for. So I find that to be more helpful. When it comes to expiration dates of things though, that can be a little bit more tricky. What I can do is take a photo and then I can highlight the words on that photo and get it to read to me, so that way I know, okay, this is the expiration date for this. It also works really well for different brands, like for example, Dove. So I'll look for the Dove brand and then I can't actually read what the description says. Usually I can read like shampoo or conditioner as well as the brand, but I just don't know what the specific thing is, like if it's for a specific type of hair or, you know, things like that. And so that's usually smaller font. I will highlight that after I've taken a photo and get it to read to me, and I find that to be very, very helpful as someone with a vision impairment. Now, when it comes to my physical disability, that doesn't really impact me shopping. It can sometimes, especially when you are shopping in the store and it's a quite cluttered store, I can struggle to move around a little bit, but that more has to do with my vision than it does my physical disability. I find that I do walk slower in more cluttered environments. I have to really watch where I'm going, and I find uneven ground to be very difficult with my physical disability. When it comes to shopping online versus in store, it just comes down to personal preference. I find it to be a lot more helpful to go into the store and try on different clothing and different clothing sizes rather than just buying something online that I think will fit and then having to return it online, which is a lot harder than having to return it in store. So I do prefer to shop in store because of that, despite the crowds and despite the clutter, which as someone who's introverted, it can be noisy and overwhelming at times, but I don't really work, so I can go during the week, which means that it's less noisy, which I find to be quite helpful. And again, just depending on the time of day you go as well, will depend on if there are people there. Again, it depends what store you're going into. Like, for example, the supermarket never really is too busy, and I can still manage to get around quite easily. Whereas things like clothing stores, sometimes, especially if it's a little bit of a smaller store, I can struggle to get around. Or places like furniture shops, because they have so many bits of furniture sticking out, because I don't have any lower field of vision, if I'm looking straight ahead, will tend to bang into things more. So because of that, there are, again, a lot of risks when it comes to shopping in store versus online. However, it just comes down to personal preference. And for me, I find shopping in store to just be easier because I can feel the fabrics. I'm able to actually touch all of the clothing with my hands and get a feel for if I like it or not. As someone with a vision impairment, you may think shopping online is easier, but at the end of the day, despite my introvertedness and my vision impairment, I do actually find shopping in store to be easier, despite the crowds and despite the clutter. Again, that is just how I personally feel when it comes to grocery shopping, clothes shopping, and furniture shopping. Any other shopping that I do, most of it is all in store. However, occasionally I can get away with shopping online when it comes to clothing stores that I've been into a lot in person. Sometimes I can buy things from their website, or when it comes to shopping for furniture, smaller things I can kind of just get away with as long as I check the measurements for, and it just depends on the pricing as well, because a lot of the time things online will be cheaper than they are in store. But at the end of the day, it does all come down to personal preference. When you have a disability, depending on the type of disability you will have different experiences with shopping online and in store. And if you struggle with your limbs, like for example, you are physically disabled in some way, you might find shopping online to be easier, especially if you're in a wheelchair and you maybe don't have the best use of your arms and legs. You might think that shopping on a computer is just easier. Again, like I said, it does come down to personal preference and what you find easier, depending on the type of disability you have. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!